This section is going to be focusing on feedback loops. Feedback loops and homeostasis is going to be the second section of this unit. The last section dealt with the cell membrane and how things move in and out of the cell. It focused on how the cells maintain homeostasis at the cellular level. This section will be looking at a larger aspect of the whole body. So the last section is more at the smaller unit of function at the cellular level. This section is including the organs, the brain, and the whole system of when things change for the body. If you remember from the last section, homeostasis is describing a balance that's inside the cells or the body when the outer environment changes. For example, when temperature changes for the body, it will cause the body to sweat or shiver. There are other types of feedback loops. Feedback loops are not just including the body of humans, they can include responses of plants, animals, and also the environment. You can see feedback loops in a whole system, such as a seasonal change of an environment is going to respond, or even within a pond. So the term feedback loop may be something more than just what we're going to discuss here. When we're looking at the term feedback loop, which is going to be what this whole process is about, you need to think about it as a feedback loop is going to be giving feedback for correction. So think about it as in any time aspect you're asking for feedback. Typically, you would be presenting something such as an essay or a writing piece to somebody and be asking for their feedback. That means you're giving them something, you're giving them a signal, you're giving them information. The person is receiving that, is going to look at it, and then give you corrections, and then you will fix it. So when we're looking at feedback loops, think about it as a signal is being received and a correction is being made to bring it back to the state of balance. There's some terms that you need to know about this section. A stimulus or stimuli is something that's going to cause the change. You can have an internal or external stimuli to the body. It could be physical, emotional, or behavioral. The first section that we will talk about, you're going to be reading an article about fear and feedback loops and how they shape our thoughts and actions. So a lot of this that we're going to discuss in this section is going to be about physical, but you can also have emotional feedback loops. If I was to show you pictures of people's faces and ask you if they're happy, sad, or scared, you can probably read their faces and see that. Emotional responses can have physical ones, such as crying when they're sad. There's two types of loops, negative and positive loops. In a negative loop, this will decrease the stimuli. This will cause the body to go back to a normal state of homeostasis, keeping it in balance. Majority of the feedback loops that you're going to hear about are going to be negative feedback loops. Positive feedback loops, there's really only two for the human body. And that's going to be labor pains to cause a baby to be born, and also blood clotting. And what's happening with a positive feedback loop is that this is going to cause an increase in the condition until the stimuli is removed. The first one we're going to talk about is temperature change and homeostasis. This is going to be the body's response to stimuli, is going to be to sweat or to shiver. When we are having something that's going to cause our body to shiver, that's an involuntary response. We can't stop our body from shivering, and we can't control it. When we're having something shiver in our body, the muscles are contracting, and they're trying to cause the body temperature to increase. On the other hand, we also have sweating. So when we have sweating, this is going to cause our body to decrease, our body temperature to decrease. This is meaning that something's going on, the temperature around our body is too hot, and so our response is to sweat. This is this is what a negative feedback loop is going to look like. If you can see, it looks like a figure 8. And so when I say negative feedback loop, pay attention to the fact that there is a G in negative and let that remind you of what this looks like. In the middle is going to be our normal body temperature. This is where when I say everything is back to a balance. Also, this is the first time you're noticing when it's called a feedback loop. So you can see that it's going up or down and bringing it back down to normal. That's why it's going to be called a loop. Let's look at these closer. When the temperature rises, this is going to send a signal to the brain. The brain is going to send a response, a signal to sweat glands and blood vessels to dilate and to cause sweat to occur. This is going to cause the heat to escape our body, and then we'll come back to a normal temperature. So this is an example of feedback. The brain is receiving information and sending a correction. On the other side of it, we also see that when the temperature is too low and falls below normal, the brain is going to receive that information and send a signal to the skeletal muscles to start contracting, and that's going to generate heat. And that will bring the temperature back to normal. The next negative feedback loop is going to be about glucose changes in your body. The pancreas releases insulin to lower the blood sugar level. What happens to people who are diabetic? Let's look at it. The normal blood glucose level is going to be 90 to 100 milligrams per milliliter of blood. When the blood glucose level is rising, the pancreas is going to release insulin. This is going to connect with the liver, causing the glucose to be stored, and the body cells are going to take up more glucose. So this is going to be a regulation to be able to take that rise in blood glucose level so that nothing bad is going to happen. No one's going to pass out and be able to regulate it. The liver is also going to store it for later on. If you look at the bottom portion, when blood glucose level drops below a certain point, the pancreas is going to release glucagon, and the liver is going to break down the glucagon and glycogen into glucose. And this is going to bring it back to a normal aspect. In the Amoeba Sisters video, we're going to watch and look at the differences of what happens to people who are diabetic and how the blood sugar is not regulated and they need support by having injections. So we're looking at the two types of negative feedback loops that you're going to have to be responsible for and to know about. It's going to be about temperature regulation between sweating and shivering, and also blood sugar and insulin with diabetes. The two positive feedback loops is going to increase a condition until the stimuli remove. And there's two types that you're going to have to know for this section: the labor process of childbirth and blood clotting. Remember that the negative is going to be bringing it back down to a reduction. It's going to reduce it back to a normal state. Positive is going to increase it until the stimuli remove. So positive does eventually become back down to a normal once the stimuli is removed. Let's look at our positive ones. We're going to start over here on this side. And it is a loop. So in this case, this is where one thing is going to lead to another, but it's not going to bring it back to a balance until the baby actually leaves the body and is labor is over with. What happens with this part is that the baby has gotten too large and is pressing down onto the cervix. The cervix is going to send a signal to the brain. The brain's going to stimulate the pituitary gland to secrete oxytocin. Oxytocin is going to be carried in the bloodstream down to the uterus, and it's going to stimulate contractions. Let's talk about what's happening with contractions. When we're looking at contractions for this whole process, contractions are going to be caused at this part of the baby, where the fetus is going to be pressing further down. So if you have contractions in this area here, it's going to be causing this to be pressing down further. If it's pressing down further, it's going to continue to send those signals to the brain to release more oxytocin to cause contractions. So for each contraction, there's going to be a pressure that's going to be increasing. The pressure that is increasing is causing the secretion of oxytocin. And so you can see that this is a cycle to try to get the baby to be born and to leave. So it's increasing the stimuli. Once the baby is removed from this whole pressure process, then the contractions will stop. Another positive feedback loop is going to be blood clotting. When we have blood clotting, it's going to send signals to increase the condition until the bleeding stops. Increasing the condition is going to be the key. So let's look at this closer. We have some kind of cut, something has occurred, and platelets are going to start to arise to the area where there's the damaged cells. It's going to send signals, and signals are going to be releasing to the platelets. They're going to cause that scabbing, and it's going to continue to send signals so that there's more platelets. So the cause is going to be the cut, and then signals are going to be sent. The increase is going to be the more platelets to arise until there is a scab and it's clotting. Once this is going to be clotted and it's not going to have a signal release, then it will stop. So this is increasing it and not causing it to stop or slow down. And here will be a video that you will watch about the blood clotting. It's going to increase the signal until the blood clots. There's a couple graphing areas where you're going to have to be able to recognize them. And so you're going to practice a little bit of this. But when we're looking at negative feedback loop, a negative feedback loop is where something is going to go up and then bring it back down to the balance. So if you're looking at temperature, temperature's rising and sweating is bringing it back down. Temperature's too cold and shivering is going to bring it back to normal. So we see this up and down wavering between the balance. On a positive feedback loop, it's going to be something that's going to increase over time. Eventually, it will stop and pause. It should stop because the contractions are going to get worse. You think about childbirth, the contractions are going to get worse and worse over time until there is nothing else to cause pressure upon the cervix. And so once that stimuli is removed, then the contractions will stop and the oxytocin will stop being sent too.